Chris and Katie, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you're all about?
Sure. Katie, do you want to start?
Oh, ladies first?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Nelson. I'm the social media and public relations coordinator for the Mountain View Police Department, and I'm going to hand it over now to Captain Hsiung, who also happens to be my boss.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to sunny Mountain View, California. I'm a captain here at Mountain View PD. Been here for 23 years, and I currently manage our investigations division, but also our public affairs social media group, which is Katie. And it's something that we've really been excited to be in that space for a few years now.
Doing tremendously incredible, inspiring work.
Oh, thank you.
So, well, thank you guys. And I'm so excited to have you on. And I think, so when the podcast was the Crisis Intelligence podcast, Chris, you and, oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Shino. Thank you. We're kind of like the inaugural podcast. And now with the relaunch, I think I'm going to follow suit with that. So this is the first episode of what is now being rebranded to the Invincible brand podcast, which is more in line with my brand and my book. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that honor. That's quite a huge thing.
Well, I won't gush. You know how I feel about you guys. Okay, so we wanted to talk about the incident that happened at YouTube recently. And maybe if you guys can paint the scene of, tell us what happened, what was the incident, and then we can dive into the crisis response that MVPD took.
Sure. I guess I can set up the stage in the beginning, and just to give your viewers and listeners a little context. The actual shooting at YouTube happened in the city of San Bruno, which is about 40 miles north of Mountain View. And that's important because you're talking about two different jurisdictions here. To really set the scene, I should tell you that when this thing happened, I was on a cruise down in Mexico. And I had been guiltily checking the internet and saw the YouTube shooting occur, but at the time that I logged off, the association to the city of Mountain View had not yet taken place. So what basically happened was when I basically went out into the ocean and lost all cell and internet connectivity, that was it for the next day and a half. And so when I woke up in Long Beach, California, a day and a half later, my phone blew up as it connected, and I started to get text messages from colleagues wishing me the best and letting me know that they were thinking of us. Only come to find that in the prior day, Katie had been knee-deep in managing the crisis where Mountain View PD basically was pulled into the YouTube shooting. So that, in a sense, sets the stage for Katie to take it away for the next fun component of what we did.
So to just kind of jump on that, let's be clear here. His last words to me were, "I hope nothing happens." So of course, you know that something inevitably will. And
he didn't knock on wood, and he didn't knock on his head, and
I don't know, but it was the famous last words. But that evening, I was at home, of course, making dinner, and I had received a phone call from somebody I used to work with at our local paper down here in San Jose, the San Jose Mercury News. And they inquired about a conversation that they had had with the woman who eventually was identified as the YouTube shooter, had a discussion with her father, who had told them that she had been contacted by us early that morning, and that he had warned our officers that she was a potential threat. So already there we were behind, in that we had not been notified that we had had any contact with her from investigators or anything of that nature. It was still very much a very separate investigation. And so when you're already behind kind of in the crisis response, you're really having to play catch up. And going off of just kind of figuring out what had happened between the captain that was here, Captain Jessica Nowaski, our lieutenant, and myself. We really had to come up with a very strategic message going forward, not only in terms of our transparency efforts, but ensuring that we had all the accurate, correct information out from the get-go. We didn't have any time to be able to do follow-up or anything like that. So that was really a very aggressive push on our part once we were able to obtain all of the information.
So I'd love to paint the scene a little bit just from a process standpoint, because I feel like that is often overlooked when people talk about crisis management, never mind my realization with people providing these services. So I think that would be beneficial. So it was the shooter's father who made the connection, or at least just stated that he had spoken, or she had spoken with a Mountain View Police Department officer, and that he had as well. Yes?
Correct.
And that he made that statement to the media?
Yes, he did.
And then that's how you became aware, because media and social media now started to blow up on the fact that, probably framing the picture of, well, if you were in communication contact, what happened and why didn't this play out differently?
Exactly.
Okay. And then from, internally, the officer or officers that communicated with her and her father, had they made the association themselves that was the same person? No.
No. In
Okay.
fact, it was, they had spoken with her at about 2 a.m. She had been found sleeping in her car. She was very calm and cooperative with us when we initially met with her. She explained why she was in the Mountain View area very coherently, very succinctly. And in fact, in our first conversation that we had with her family, once we had identified her, she had been reported missing out of the San Diego area. The family simply just asked, well, is she coming home? And she was 38 years old. So we just said, no, she doesn't want to. And they said, okay. And that was it. And what the family neglected to state to media was that, in fact, they had called to follow up and said, she was kind of upset that some of her videos for YouTube had been demonetized. And she may be in the area to discuss that with them. So there was a very broken picture by the time the media got hold of this, of the whole situation, and we had to kind of fill in those gaps.
And even with that doesn't, how many people, are upset with something and have civilized, humane conversations?
Not all the time.
Not all the time, but I'm saying majority, like your mind doesn't automatically go to, she might be a risk or a threat.
Correct. In fact, but during the course of our conversation with her, which was about 20 minutes long, we asked her several times, do you want to hurt yourself? Do you want to hurt others? And she emphatically answered no. But telling that in words to the media and to the general public is very different from actually showing them. And we learned, that was something that we learned pretty quickly in our kind of sharing of this information as the incident unfolded.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so you made the connection because you were forced to, and then what happened internally? You said you had to strategize, but you also had to gather facts.
Correct. So unfortunately, by the time we made the connection that we had in fact spoken with the woman early that morning, it was way too late for any of us to be able to actually come in and view the footage from the officer worn camera. So we made a plan to, dark 30 the next morning to come in, review the footage, and create a very detailed timeline to release to the media and on all of our social media channels to allow everyone to kind of see what had happened. And this was a framework that Captain Hsiung had compiled from years before that has worked without fail every time. So I had simply to follow the framework, and thank you, Captain Hsiung, for that, to be able to appropriately and succinctly, quickly, transparently share this information. So by the time that was actually shared with the public, it was less than 12 hours after we had received this initial phone call from somebody I used to work with, who was inquiring about what they had been told.
Okay. And you made the decision to share that footage prior to seeing it.
Actually, no, there was, and Captain Hsiung can actually fill in a little bit here. We saw the footage and we knew that we had done a good job. However, there were other agencies involved at this point, and we knew that we needed to at least share that with them before going public with the information so that the investigation took its course, if you will.
Okay. And how long did that take? For them to
Chris, you want to go on that one?
Sure. Yeah. So it was about a week and a half. So we want to give the rights to the investigating primary agency, which was San Bruno Police Department. We wanted them to see everything first. And above all else, as much as we want to be transparent about everything, we don't ever want to be in a position where we might release something to the public that would jeopardize the criminal investigation. So that was always in the backdrop of our minds. And it was really hard to sit there on our hands with that, because in that time we had media who were kind of filling in the blanks on their own with theories as to why Mountain View PD was not releasing footage. The initial holding statement that Katie put out was phenomenal. So that really kind of calmed things down for a few days, but the investigative reporters in the area wanted to fill in the blanks with a different narrative. And so there was strategically a time where we just had to wait. And once San Bruno gave us the green light and the thumbs up, we basically had ready to go what you've probably seen online, which was the entire written statement to go with the video in order to provide context to what the viewers were seeing.
Which was beautifully crafted. And there's going to be links below this video or recording, no matter where anybody's listening to it or watching it from. Okay, in that week. So I'm going to come back to, it took about a week in order for process to take place, or due process to unfold, where you could actually provide that context. But Katie, you also said that you had communicated within 12 hours. That's the holding statement that you're referring to?
Correct.
Can you share with viewers and listeners there's going to be links to that, but strategy behind and decision making and process behind that holding statement?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, the need to be transparent was tantamount to the whole situation. Because we were already behind, we had to come up with a statement that reflected not only that we were willing to be open, but that we were thoroughly transparent in what we were sharing with our public. So word for word, we basically restated what was viewable in the video in this holding statement. But again, words only go so far. That being said, we had statements that we made sure to repeat regularly to kind of send the message home that this encounter was absolutely routine, that there was nothing that could have allowed us to predict the tragedy that would have unfolded 12 hours later. And we continued those talking points throughout the week. As Chris said, the statement itself did quite a great job in kind of calming down people. Obviously, there were those who were still wanting to assume much and really listen very little. So by the time we were able to actually get out the footage along with a second full-blown statement and essentially timeline that was provided, that kind of sealed the deal in terms of our crisis response, because it was so detailed and so full of information that by the time people actually got to finishing viewing just the first officer's footage, I was getting messages saying, wow, this is really boring. And I've never been so happy to hear that in my life.
No kidding. So
Yeah.
and I also want to, I like to dive deep, and I like to get people to think and to see all of the angles. So in your first response statement, so your holding statement, who were you speaking to, and what was the risk of that? Like, what risk was that confronting and mitigating in terms of that statement? What was the objective?
The objective was to allow our public to know that we heard them and that we wanted to provide as much information as we could, as Chris said, without compromising the criminal investigation, because at this point we didn't know if we were going to be involved in that at all. The risk of that, however, was just upsetting people even more, or having them just continue on with their fodder of, why couldn't you have predicted this, or something of that nature, which we did see quite a bit of. Unfortunately, predictive policing isn't anywhere near where I think some assume it might be. But that being said, the statement definitely detailed greatly kind of just a simple contact with somebody who is sleeping in a vehicle in our city, which is not illegal. And because they were behaving so cooperatively, there was no need for further investigation. And I don't know, Chris, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of kind of where we were going with that.
Sure. Melissa, if I could jump in to just provide a different angle on this
Yeah.
deep dive, and that would be that it was important to note that Katie had a seat at the table. And by that, I mean, she had the ear of the other captain, lieutenants, command staff, and especially the chief. And that's something that's been instituted a long time ago. And I think you know the advantages of having a PIO at that level with that listening audience versus someone who's relegated to a corner office and just able to give recommendations. So that was key. And I think the other part is a concept I know you're very familiar with, and that's the bank of community trust that we've built up here in Mountain View. I think that's what led us not survive, but just really weather those first few days of no video. We're on that credit. And I think the community and to an extent the media was willing to wait it out and knew that we said that it was coming. We're telling you everything we can right now. And at the end of the day, we came through with that promise.
Absolutely, like you always do. And that was the next place that I wanted to go. So thank you. I wanted to give really context and background and process. And then, and I mean, Chris, when you fell into or woke up into reception and your phone was going off the hook, kind of just what did that look like for you? Because you weren't home yet.
No, I was about 4 ice cream cones into the whole ordeal on the cruise ship. So, but no, reading all of those, I will tell you honestly, and I'm not kidding here, I was not stressed out because one, I knew Katie had the tactical expertise to just take us through it. And I knew the right things were in place. I knew the chief and the command staff believed in everything we've set up to date. So it was just, if there was any pain point, it was the pain point of having to just get through the process. But it definitely had a huge light at the end of the tunnel. We kind of knew how it was going to play out. We could predict that, once we're able to get the full picture out with our video, the public would understand, the media would understand. And in the end, that's what ended up happening.
And so I love that, because I love that when I'm on stage, one of the moments where I bring, I spend a good 15, depending on how much time I have, but 15, 20 minutes making people very uncomfortable with today's realities and challenges and real-time obstacles that present themselves in times of viral issues and crises. And then I bring them over to get them to close their eyes and picture a very worst case scenario that when they think about it, their heart drops to the pit of their stomach because they know they're not ready. And then I bring them from there to imagine if in those breaking moments, you have complete confidence that your team knows instinctively precisely what to do, not just to manage the incident, but to make smart decisions in the heat of the moment that connect you closer to your stakeholders. And that is, Mountain View Police Department is, by every single sense and mean of when I say crisis ready, what I mean by that, Mountain View Police Department is crisis ready. And so hearing you say that you were on a cruise ship and didn't have access to your phone for nearly 18 hours, and you get access and it starts pinging up, but you have that instinctive confidence in your team because of that. That's where everybody should strive to be, because crises strike at the most inopportune times. That's just how it happens, as you know. So let's talk. I'd love to hear, because you have that, because you've developed that over time proactively every single day. Can you tell listeners and viewers what that looks like for you? What is the mindset? What is the culture? What goes into the everyday behaviors of being crisis ready? Because you may think, I think some people think that law enforcement are supposed to be crisis ready, but crisis ready to this point, and just actually, you said PIO earlier. For the non-law enforcement professionals listening, PIO is Public Information Officer. So, what does that look like from this new reality that we live in every day? Does that make sense?
Yes. So I think you need, and I think you've heard us say this before too, is top-down buy-in, right? Bottom-up support. So it's obviously, I think most private sector, public sector would go in and make the assumption, yes, the CEO, the board, the management team needs to buy in to how we manage crisis, both online and offline. But what that involves is whoever is in Katie's role or whoever is managing the message has a seat at the table, has a seat at the command post, has input and is used day to day, not just relegated to, don't bother us unless there's a crisis. At the same time, the bottom or the line level of any organization also needs to see what that looks like, because any response is going to involve them, right? In this case, Katie went out and spoke to the two officers who were photoed, who were going to basically be splashed across network news internationally. And so they knew through prior experience of seeing how we interacted online, they already, in a sense, innately knew the why. Why do we have to do this as an organization? Why can't we just bury the photo or the video and just let the media say what they want? Instead, they understood that, and she met with them to further kind of close the loop and help them understand that. And in the end, we got what we asked for, which was they completely understood. They agreed. I think one of the officers spontaneously said, yeah, we should put it out because it would explain everything that we did. So that kind of shows you holistically in the entire organization from top down, bottom up, that once that organization understands the importance, understands the why behind not just when the crisis hits, but everything leading up to it, I think that's when you get the whole picture. That's when you get kind of everyone running on all cylinders.
Absolutely. And having the mindset internally to know instinctively that that's a necessity. And not just that, but I see often that third-party collaborations prior to experiencing crisis are often overlooked. So not just the right people having the seat at the table, but externally having those relationships where you know what to expect from whatever third party that may be. In this case, it was San Bruno. In other cases, it's sometimes their local law enforcement or the FBI or vendors or whatever the case may be. And there's always most always a third party factor. Having that, I'm assuming, I actually don't know the answer to this, that you have that relationship with San Bruno PD.
Yes.
Yes. So why doesn't that surprise me? And it goes to show, so having that confidence in one another and trust in one another and knowing that expectations will be met and what those expectations entail from each of you. Yes?
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Anything else in terms of like painting the scene or important points that people should know before kind of moving? I'd love to move on after that to kind of just some tactical proven steps that you take to achieve this level of crisis readiness. But before we go there, is there any other context or setting that people should know?
I don't think so.
No. I mean, I think we covered it too, but just in case. So we've covered a whole lot. We've looked at identifying the risk and understanding what was expected and what was the risk of not giving that context. We've looked at third-party collaborations and partnerships and relationships. We've looked at internal culture. In any one of those areas, what are they're very high level and they're very abstract, right? In an ideal world, it's nice to think, yeah, that's great, but how do I actually implement that? And what are some tried and true processes that you guys have adapted that have proven to work in order to get to the level that you are currently in terms of crisis readiness?
One thing that comes to my mind, and Katie, jump in right after this if you want,
Sure.
Is when we post things, when we write things, we do it from the sense of not what makes sense to us, but makes sense to the audience, the followers, and the media. I think that's key because I think so many organizations, both private and public, write it from the standpoint of a communications professional or a PR manager, and you forget your audience. But the other part of that is I think what Katie's and her tools that she brings to the table is, as a former journalist, she can write things almost, I think when she first got hired here, one of the first things I said was, I want you to write our stories like you would write them for the newspaper. So it's both written in a format and context that reads like a newspaper article, but it's also factual and tells a story of whatever crisis or non-crisis that we're in.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of the importance of communication in any sense, crisis or otherwise, is writing and speaking from a human level, not from a penal code, not from a strategic standpoint in terms of verbiage, just talking on a human level. And so being able to do that at our organization, we constantly strive to be able to connect with people on levels that they wouldn't necessarily assume from a law enforcement agency or from a government agency in general. And that's really been to our benefit, to be able to connect with them on such a basic level so that when the time comes when we have to have a very serious message come out, we're still writing in such a way that speaks to the human aspect of things, but also shares the information accordingly. And we have seen that time and again where we will put out a press release or we'll put out information and we see a literal copy paste. So when you're reading a news story and it says "we" coming from a news organization, you kind of sit there and it takes you a second to realize that they've actually taken our text and plugged it into their news story and have forgotten to change the "we" to the law enforcement organization or something. And that in itself has been very rewarding because we know what we have written is so concise and so clear that there's nothing that needs to be changed or there are no lingering questions. And that's a huge bonus point.
No lingering questions. It actually bewilders me sometimes. We can anticipate and what I hear you saying is that you communicate with emotional intelligence every day. And
we certainly try.
Well, you do. I will be the third party that says you do, affirmatively. And you do that, and I'd love for you to share some examples. And for listeners and viewers, the very first episode of the Crisis Intelligence podcast, which was this podcast before it was called Invincible Brand, is Captain Hsiung and Katie, who was your PIO at the time. And you give those strategies, but I'd still love to hear just to kind of give context. But what I hear is that you take those initiatives every single day to Captain, your words are to make deposits into the Bank of Community Trust, which I love. I still use that and quote you all the time from stage and in literature. And it's in doing that every day and building those relationships, not only do you build trust and credibility and gain the benefit of the doubt in a crisis, the deserved benefit of the doubt in a crisis, because you have a proven track record and people believe in you, but you also know how to communicate with your community. You can anticipate what they're going to expect and the questions that they're going to have. And you have that relationship where it's not now flipping a switch that wasn't ever flipped on or off, the day before type of thing. And anticipating questions is something that every single organization can do now when they seek to understand who their stakeholders are for every single one of their high-risk scenarios. And to your point, Katie, that does wonders. When you anticipate an answer before they're asked, that in and of itself, even if we just look at the mitigation of influx of inquiries and demands and questions and rumors, and that can flood in and be very overwhelming, you nip those in the bud before they even have the opportunity to happen.
Absolutely.
As a result of knowing who your community members are, what they expect, and understanding from a human level what will be their concerns and how can we address those now. So I love that. That's beautiful. And so because I said it, can you give some examples of how you do that every day? Like especially I love these examples because they come from a law enforcement agency where you wouldn't expect it and you do it more brilliantly than most, corporate organizations. So what are some of those things those tactics, those strategies, the way that you play, I'm going to call it, with your community on a daily?
Chris, do you want to take this one first?
No, you go ahead. This is your brainchild. You get the credit for this.
One of my favorite things that we've incorporated, and I definitely try and do it more often than not, is to use emojis. More people are communicating in emojis now than they are in actual text. So to be able to, for example, we had an officer stop by a lemonade stand this past weekend, and we were able to incorporate fun play on words plus emojis, and that just absolutely resonated with the community. And we're able to change that up on each platform. Chris has a great saying about how platforms are the language, social media is the dialect. And to be able to know how to talk to each audience essentially on each platform is critical. And believe it or not, that even translates down to simple image text, which, are emojis or GIFs or something like that. And I really appreciate that as a law enforcement agency, we've been given the freedom to really expand our abilities to connect with people, from something as basic as using a GIF of iced coffee for a coffee with a cop promotion, or being able to use GIFs when we are talking about a Star Wars film that we are promoting, or PSA that we're promoting. Stuff like that has just been, it's been really great to connect on even a level as creative as that.
That's amazing. And can you share how that evolved? Because I think that it might be overwhelming for some. And I've heard you say it in the past, Chris, just kind of how you were brave, I suppose, in the beginning and what that looked like. Can you share a little bit about, because you don't just jump in knowing. Nobody does. It takes time and experience and give and take and trial and error. So can you share a little bit about what that looked like for Mountain View PD?
Sure. I think a lot of it is like responsible risk taking, understanding, and maybe it's born a little bit of the Silicon Valley startup culture as well, which is fail fast, fail often, but learn from it and move on and go, right? And I think that's counter to what you might find in government and maybe even some organizations in the private sector as well.
Absolutely.
So, you know, early on, and I think you remember this example, when we would tweet out the location of where officers were hiding, right? You know, what's the risk of that? If the risk is I get made fun of by my peers, okay, I'm willing to accept that. But the reward is a community that all of a sudden comes out and goes, wow, that was really interesting. I loved that, right? And then you build on that. And so, you know, something Katie does, we have an amphitheater here in town that has concerts. We host a lot of big names. And I didn't get it at first because, you know, I'm not as culturally in tune as Katie is, but she would be tweeting out paraphrased lyrics of the artist, right? And she's just, but the message is either traffic
a lot
safety
of time on my
or,
hands.
right?
Well, it's
Yeah,
your job. Don't say that. You're paid to do it. It's your job.
And she'll tag the artist, and sometimes we'll even see the artist and the promoter and the venue retweet and reshare that, and that's signs of that message resonating, right, with the greater audience. And these are people we never would have reached before had we stuck with a very boring government tone, right? So I think you always have to risk or weigh the risks and the rewards. And we're not going to go off the reservation and do something completely unprofessional or embarrassing. And sometimes we do see that from our colleagues across the country in law enforcement, where it's almost, they want the virality of a post, and they're willing to sacrifice their integrity of a department or the brand that they've built up. It makes us cringe sometimes. So at the end of the day, I mean, you do want to take some risks, but you also want to, never disparage the brand that you've worked so hard to build up.
Never go against values. Values are what tie you emotionally in ultimately to your communities.
Right. Yep.
I love that. I love that. And I love the lyrics, the paraphrased lyrics. It's so much fun. And you're right. I mean, that shows the people behind the uniform, right? That it's not, you're on one side of the blue line and we're on the other. It's we're all human, we're all people, we're all in this together. This is our community, and let's have fun. And then that translates into when we're also, here to serve and protect. And when we need to, we're there. Exactly. So I love that. And I love the idea of, I love the dual message there about taking risks, but not grave risks that compromise, right? And it really isn't about the viral. It's not. It's about making connections every day and building trust with those who matter most to the brand, whether it's corporate, whether it's government, no matter what that is. So it's not that one-off. Even getting that one-off, you're going to get a little bit of buzz. You're going to maybe enjoy some positive limelight, but that you're not going to have that is not going to result in the type of trust and credibility that Mountain View PD has earned over the course of, every day for the last years.
Preach. You go ahead and preach.
Yeah.
Oh, you're learning.
Anything else? Any other, just anything else that you want to share that would benefit listeners and viewers in terms of building trust, becoming crisis ready, implementing that culture, anything?
One thing that comes to mind, and I think you mentioned you'd have the links to our release when we actually did put out the YouTube shooting, to me, that was the epic mic drop moment. If there was some such thing as a written mic drop, you put it out there and you just hear silence, that was it for me. I mean, I'd never seen it like that before. And it's a great case study to, use to anticipate questions, provide context as to who or why or what we did. And it's not just applicable to law enforcement. I think so many corporations speak from a corporate voice, and they're used to their lingo, and they just assume that their customers would understand that corporate lingo. But I think in times of crisis, when you're able to just speak on behalf or speak to the audience, almost, I tell people when we speak, is imagine you're sending this message to your loved one or to your spouse or someone, and you want them to understand intimately what you know about this job or what you know about this issue. Speak in that tone, right? And so I think that's a great example if your listeners want to look at that. I don't know, Katie, if you have any other things nuggets of wisdom you want to drop.
No, I think just to kind of reiterate, the more questions you can answer up front, the less questions you'll get on the back end. And that may require a longer release, that may require more effort into the statement that you put out or the statement that you video and you put on your channels. You do need to remember to be available always. I think once people think they put something out, that's the end of it. And Chris practices this regularly, which is two-way engagement, and being able to answer follow-up questions if they exist, or being able to ensure that the community knows you're there even after the fact. That'll not only build the trust that you have with your followers and your community, but that will also allow you to maintain a transparency and a visibility that so many others strive for, and yet they fail to achieve because they don't stick around for the follow-up.
I love that. I love both of those. I was going to say something to what you said, Chris, and it just escaped me. It'll come back. Awesome. Anything else?
I don't think so.
No, I think I wanted to, I don't know if there'll be an opportunity at the end, but I do want to thank you for the work that you do, because so much of what you've done, just this morning, I already sent off your crisis flow chart to an agency that was knee deep in a crisis. Basically one of those, like, follow this, this is a very simple, easy way to understand and navigate yourself through this crisis.
Thank you. That is, well, you know what that means to me. So thank you. Yes. Yes, that hopefully it helped and it served and served people, communities. So thank you for that very, very much.
Well, thank you.
What was I going to say? So the thing that actually, it came back to me, what I was going to add to what you said, Chris, is, so the document, not the document, but the written summary of the video that you guys released, and then so people will see the link and you can go to it, but it's literally play by play of what you will find in the video, which is below. And I read that, and then I hit play, and I watched it because I wanted to see, but my initial reaction was, I don't need to watch it. I got it all. And it makes sense, and I trust, and all of that. So it wasn't just about, and to your point, actually mentioned it briefly earlier, but you didn't really go into it, was the context behind the video. And I think that plays to that too. You didn't just say, here you go. You thoughtfully, with emotional intelligence, put out, and to just kind of keep building on your important point, Katie, of that in it of itself answered questions.
And that was very deliberate. And that statement wasn't written and done kind of thing. There were several iterations that we went through to ensure that we had everything in there that we could possibly have before releasing it along with the video, so that in the event that someone like yourself read it all and then watched the video and they thought, oh, it's already all there. That was the whole point. And that's kind of, I think, the effort that should be made every time, crisis or not, that you make every effort to be able to ensure that it's all there in the package.
Amazing. And it's all there every time.
Yes.
In the good, in the bad, and everything in between.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that this really works only if your organization is doing it in practice consistently, right? If you, let's give an example. If they read your book, they totally buy in and they're like, we're all in, but they don't do anything in the meantime, in the absence of crisis, to even practice these steps. Doesn't matter. There's no audience there to listen to them. And even if there were, the trust has not been built up to really bank against it.
Yes. And I think that that's important for viewers and listeners to know, that this was not about luck. This was about earned trust and credibility and skill set that has been built strategically and proactively every single day for years on end.
Yep.
Absolutely. Where can people find and follow your brilliance?
Katie, you want to give them the rundown of Mountain View PD's presence?
Sure. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on Nextdoor. If you live in Mountain View and you're listening, please follow us. We're also on Snapchat. So any of those social media channels, just type in Mountain View PD and we're there for you.
Awesome. And of course, there will be links below this wherever people are listening or watching it from. Katie and Chris, thank you so much for your time and for sharing this just empowering story with everybody. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks. It's been an honor.
Honor's mine.